Okay, so I know I'm scheduled to do a live at 1 o'clock today, but I've had so many people ask me about this. I'm going to do a quick live. I'm going to not quick live. I'm going to explain my story. I've given bits and pieces of it. I've never sat down and done the entire thing. I've come very close a number of times. But today I think I need to do that and I need to pin it. I need to pin it on the top of the channel. Hey, Nitwit, so that everybody knows what this is. So the next time someone asks me, says, oh my gosh, I had no idea you were Quiverfull. I'll just point them to this. Oh, the title is My Story. I Got Out Ex-Evangelical because I need to do my ex-evangelical story, the whole unvarnished truth. I may not be answering a lot of chat while I'm doing this, but I'll definitely answer questions at the end, especially. And I'm going to try to get through this quickly because this is not territory I wanted to rehash again and again and again. So I'm just going to do it once and for all, and I'm going to post it. I'm going to post it where everybody sees it. Everybody sees it. Oh, thank you, Erin. It was funny because I was trying to decide how to get dressed today, and I thought, well, I got my hair up. I'm wearing my loose old dress. It's got places where it's falling apart. I got holes. I'm just going to go with myself the way I am. The way I am is the way I am. And if you think that looks fabulous, it's awesome. So, yeah. Hey, JC. So this is going to be the story of how I got into Quiverfull and how I got out. And you see, here comes Pork to tap me on the shoulder. She's going to tap me on the shoulder in a minute and demand I pet her, but I'm going to try to ignore her so I can get through this story. Thank you. I'm very comfy because it's very hot here today. It's very hot and very humid. My husband is running a friend to the airport, so he's going to be gone all day. So I get the bed pulled apart so I can wash everything instead of him flopping himself down on our mattress and making it dirtier. I like to have the bed clean all times. Okay. So I'm going to back you up a ways. I'm going to back you up to summer of 2000. Not 2000, summer of 1995. No, was it? No, I think it was earlier than that. Anyway, sometime in the 90s, in the summertime, I can't remember exactly which year now, we had a flood, 100-year flood in Virginia that it flooded the business that Jim and I had. We had a country store near the hiking trails of Shenandoah National Park. And we'd done quite well with it right up until that day. The kitty, you love the kitty. She's just annoying. She's one of my strays. So anyway, in this store we had, they were doing really well. My husband was working in DC. I was running the store with the help of an employee. We had a flood one day. Nobody was expecting it. I drove to the store that day saying that the water was starting to creep up a little bit, get a little nervous, but not too bad. What happened was the water rolled past it about 18 inches deep past our store. We didn't get much water in the store, maybe 6 or 8 inches because I'd sandbagged the doors. Laura and I, my youngest child, and if Laura, if you're watching, you or Ian or Andy, I'm waving because I know you sometimes will watch my feeds. My youngest child, 6 weeks to the day after the flood, got very ill. And about 3 months later, I did. But what happened with her is her platelets started dying and nobody had any idea why. I had her UVA over and over and over. She'd have a week in the hospital, 2 days out, back in the hospital for another week. It was a really stressful time between having to throw away inventory and clean out the muck of the store that was flooded. That was bad and depressing enough, particularly if you add in the fact that I've just gotten a deli order and ice cream order to the tune of like $6,000 and I had to throw it all away. It was just one of the most depressing times you could imagine. I had people in the community that were angry at me because I actually had to shut down the store at one point to take her to the hospital. It was that bad. So I'm laboring under this horrible stress. And my husband has this friend, I'm going to call him Tom Smith because that's what I call him on NLQ on No Longer Quivering. Tom went to this church he was always trying to get us to go to, and we'd gone to it a couple times, and I kept telling Jim, I says, they're like Stepford people. They are all smiley and weird, and I just don't want any part of that. So I'd already been to this church. Well, Tom came around, and I was trying to get a hold of Jim that very first time that I was taking Laura to the hospital to say, I'm on my way to UVA right now. They're telling me that our daughter likely has leukemia. Well, it was not leukemia, thank God. It was ITP, idiopathic thrombocytic purpura. I think that's how it's pronounced. So she was really sick for a long time. During her really sick for a long time thing, what happened was Tom Smith and the members of the church came alongside me and started love bombing me. Now, if you've ever been part of a CULT, you'll know what love bombing is. Basically, what happens is they find you when you're your most emotionally vulnerable place, and they just pour love, acceptance, whatever on you until you crumble and join. That's kind of what love bombing is. And it's not very genuine or authentic. So anyway, they were doing this to me, but I was in no shape to be able to say, get the hell away from me or anything like that. I just went to that church and was just laying up there because I was having such incredible stress to the point where I was thinking about killing myself. I got so depressed in the aftermath of my daughter's illness. All the times I was having to run her to the doctor or the clinic to get blood work, get this, get that, take her to UVA to get gamma globulin treatments. It was a very unpleasant time. And then I got sick to make it worse. Every single day, I thought about killing myself. Every single day. That's how bad it was. That day I would drive towards the store to try to open up again, and I would think about ramming my car into a tree, just ending it all because my all had gotten just too horrible. So while that was going on, they were all love bombing me, and I eventually sort of joined the church, and so did Jim. And they were so nice to me. They were so loving and so understanding. What could I do? But um, so I joined. And at the first, it seemed like just a really good, nice country church. Hey, Rena Roo, where everybody knew each other and everybody loved one another. The pastor seemed sweet. There was not a hint that there was toxic anything going on. And I'm not sure how toxic level it was at that point anyway. So I joined. I joined with our 4-year-old daughter who was having health issues. Yeah, I joined with our 7-year-old son and my husband. And my husband had been agitating off and on for years for us to go to church, and we'd go for a while and not go to different churches. So I just thought this was just more of the same. We were just coming here for a while. But I got so sick that we sold the store and started going to things like women's Bible study. I started fully participating. Jim sort of participated, but he didn't participate at the level that I was participating in. And there were a few little red flags all the way from the beginning. JC, it is so hot here. It's so humid today. I'm rushing out to turn on the sprinkler and then rushing back in. It's so bad. So here we are. Me, fully sold out. My husband's sort of on board. And my kids drinking the Kool-Aid with me. I don't know at what point I realized that we were heading towards crazy town. But pretty quickly, like on Mother's Day, there were a number of women that got up and spoke about Quiverfull. They spoke about that they had been called by the Lord to keep their wombs in God's hands, for him to open or close, and him to control the number of children they had. That was the first time I've ever heard of it, and I just thought that was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. But at the same time, I had doctors at UVA saying, you probably should have another child just so that we can bank the corn. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rena Roo. Thank you. You are fun. They were telling me to have another child so that I could bank the cord blood just in case this continued with my youngest. and they had to do a stem cell replacement of some sort because that's how bad it was. They were talking that way. It's like have another child for that reason and that reason alone. And so I was starting to get on board with the Quiverfull wagon because I could see that I could see that these families were just so perfect. So the families I knew that were doing it, they made it look really attractive and really easy. And there was biblical justification for this. There was all kinds of stuff going on that seemed to be pushing me that way. So I talked to my husband and we decided we were going to do that. If nothing else, we could bank the cord blood on each one of these babies we were going to have to save in case something happened with our daughter, who did finally gradually start getting better. She still to this day has immune system problems, just like I do. And I really think to this day, we're both exposed to something in the flood water. I could smell there was fuel oil from various farm implements and things. And there's no telling what there was in that water. But I feel like both of our illnesses, including my mast cell, likely came out of that. But I'm not sure. So we got with the deal. We were going to be Quiverfull. Then I had a miscarriage. Then I had another. Then I had another and another. I actually ended up racking up 9 miscarriages in the years. And we were there almost 20 years, very close to it. There were times when I felt stronger about everything than others. There were a lot of times I turned to my children and said, please don't listen to this. This is not right. Stuff like kept happening, like my one day we were there and they made all the kids bring up their Pokemon cards and they tore them up at the altar. And all the kids were just weeping and wailing. That was a really normal thing. I was telling somebody earlier today about being triggered by the song Come Now Is the Time to Worship. That I've sung 1,000,000 trillion times, that song. But I remember after leaving, being in a Mennonite Amish store, buying groceries, and literally starting to throw up. I ended up in the bushes throwing up because I was so triggered, because that was a song that worship team that our pastor would sometimes play when he was lecturing all of us about our weights, doing a weigh-in and insisting that everybody go on a diet on worship team. There's just things like that. There was such extreme control. And it started gradually. It wasn't so bad at first, but after a while, the church just kept going off the deep end to the left side. I just had never seen anything like it. And I was going along with it. That was the horrible thing. They started preaching more and more extreme theology. One of the things they preached was that if you had an illness, that was because either sin in your life, sin in the life of your ancestors, something you had done that had opened that door and given Satan permission to put that disease upon you. On worship team, yes, they did. They monitored your weight. And if they thought you were fat, you'd get pulled over and get the pastor pastor lecture about being an example. And I was on worship team, and I'm fluffy. So guess who kept getting lectured to bring their weight down? At one point, he walked up to all of us that were on not a worship team, but like a team of prayer warrior type thing, and mentioned to those of us that were fluffy that Gold's Gym was opening, and they had quick, cheap memberships we could all benefit from. We could all be skinny. He said that to us. A bunch of middle-aged ladies struggling with their weight and their health, and so many different, until I said at 3rd Street, I didn't even think about it being a bad thing, because I tried to block out a lot of this. I try not to think about this. But the theology kept getting more extreme. They started hosting big conferences, the church did. We hosted and bragged that we healed all these people. We linked up with Tom Hauser's church, which is a vineyard church, in Wilmington, North Carolina. We were part of another assembly of churches that I found out later was linked to a church that the guy who wrote and starred in the Righteous Gemstones was part of. And I was wondering, because there are 2 stories in the first season of Righteous Gemstones. then I know I witnessed something very similar going like that in our church. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of his church stories, some of them straight out of that presbytery of churches that we were belonged to. Um, Aaron, he was skinny, skinny, skinny. So he didn't have a weight problem. I did see him recently, and he has gained probably 100 pounds. But I'm not going to throw rocks at him for that. It is what it is. When your body starts doing crazy things, it's not so easy for some of us to maintain to be super skinny. Um, but hit you like a ton of bricks. It does, Third Street. And the fact that I had severe asthma my entire life and I was guzzling steroids like they were M&Ms did not help. That's when the majority of my weight came on, was then. And now I'm steroid intolerant. So there I was struggling with what was mast cell and being told, don't go to the doctor, don't go to the doctor. Doctors are idolatry. And really suffering horribly, and sometimes having to make the decision, damn it, I'm going to the doctor. I think the worst was for us was right around the time that I had my last miscarriage. And my husband and I we were in the room weeping. This happened, we were on vacation down in Louisiana. So here we are in the ER at the Lady of the Lake Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we're both crying and just saying, we can't do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. So that was really the beginning of the end for us. They creeped up with the toxic. So I started having so many problems after that that my gynecologist said, you need to have a hysterectomy. You had nothing but problems with that part of your body since you started menstruating. So I started thinking about that, and I confided in a church friend, and that was a big mistake. The next thing I know, they told me that I had to pray for God to restore my uterus to be how it should be so I could have children, more children. I was told that I had obviously committed some kind of sin. People kept theorizing what my sins were to cause this to happen. And yeah, you should go to the pastor when you're sick. At the same time, my red blood cell count kept falling every month because I was having these horrendous periods, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I kept having to have DNCs to stop the horrible bleeding, and my counts fell. It was just awful. But I was still believing. I was believing. I just said, well, either God can heal me or I'm going to have this thing yanked out. Well, I ended up having the thing yanked out. And there were some people at church that told me that my belief wasn't strong enough as a result of that. I had somebody introduce me one day as her semi-heathen friend who only had 3 children. At the same time, I didn't realize this. I didn't realize that my husband was having interior doubts. I knew he'd had doubts from day one. And I had doubts that I shared with my kids, like when they started coming down hard on masturbation. I said, don't listen to that. Your sex drive is normal. Your bodies are going through changes. What you're feeling is normal. Masturbation is normal. I said that to them because I knew a little bit better. But I think the reason that I didn't totally buy into it is I was a little older than the average person who first started going there. I also had an education, which was something a lot of people going there did not have. They, yeah, and they treated me pretty callously after that. So I was still sold out, but Jim was having his issues. And then Jim got kidney cancer and they had to take out his kidney. And I got to see where the rubber met the road for a lot of these people up there who weren't criticizing him for having kidney removed, but had criticized me for having my uterus yanked out. So there it was. And my husband started going to a different church is really the thing that broke it. Okay. Even though I was having doubts and he was having huge doubts, I was still going to church. I was still on worship team. I was still on altar ministry. I was still on healing team. I was still on everything, still doing everything. And Jim said, I am more comfortable at my Methodist church. I'll come for worship, and then I'm going to the Methodist church. And I wanted to ask you what that was all about, but because I was a submissive wife who never argues with her husband about things, who lets him be the spiritual head, I didn't ask him what was going on. I just did not ask him. I just said, okay. And thank you so much. Who needs those awful fake friends? You are absolutely right, Rena Rue. So what happened to really push me out was Tom Smith. Okay. One Sunday, when I was up on worship team rehearsing, and Laura, my youngest, was sitting in the she was sitting among the people who had come early for church, who were watching worship team rehearsals. Um, yeah, they did forget to squeeze in medical school. What happened was that before I had taken the stage, the pastor had said to me, "Well, your husband's going to another church. I can't let you host um, home group any longer." And I said, "I'm fine with that. I'm kind of done with home group, mostly because Tom Smith made it miserable every single time. He would do things like show up with his guitar and play his really simplistic music that everybody just kind of cringed at. I like Jesus. Jesus likes me. That's all it was. And he would just try to take over home group. It was bad. So I told the pastor, I said, okay, I'm fine with that. That's a responsibility I would rather not have. So he said, yeah, it's going to take a couple of weeks for us to find somebody to do it that I trust. So I was fine with that. My daughter's sitting in the pews. I'm on the platform. I can see all the way down the front aisle. I can see Tom Smith talking to the pastor. I see Tom Smith make a beeline into the sanctuary where he went from person to person to person and started telling them that Jim and I had been stripped of home group, of hosting a home group. It was like it was a gossip buffet. And this wasn't the first time. Every time I'd had DNCs because of bleeding, I would have to debunk the rumor that I'd had an abortion. So there's that. So there was all this gossip going on, and it was really hard for me because I was on the prayer team. And afterwards, people would come up and say, "Why'd you pray for so and so?" I said, "I really can't tell you. What we say on prayer team stays there. There's no sharing it anywhere." So there was a lot of gossip that went on at this place, and I just got tired of dealing with it. So I'm on the platform. I could see my daughter get very upset. I can see her start crying. In a break in the songs, I can hear what Tom Smith is telling people. He's telling people that, that we got stripped of home group because my husband is an apostate that's run off to another church. And this is when he was still attending worship service and driving to the Methodist church for their service afterwards. So Laura starts crying. I start crying. There was a whole lot of crying going on. Let me tell you, first rule of worship team, I always tell people when I was to train people for worship team, never take the platform if you're crying. Never, 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 because it never works out good. When you're crying, your voice goes all over the place. You can't control it. And I was crying that day. I was on the platform crying my eyes out during worship because of that. I came down off the platform and I said something to the pastor, and I said, "You told me last week when I came to you about all this that you would make sure that the loud voices that gossip about people and say the most unfair things, you would talk to them." I said, "You see Tom Smith, you've heard him running around the sanctuary saying this damn lie about us." And he said, "That's really your husband's job." He tells me this a week after telling me, "Don't worry about it. We'll be supportive of you." And it comes out, he says, "You should divorce your husband. If you're going to, you should stay here and just divorce him because clearly the enemy has him. And the enemy has always had him. He's not been a good guy. So you should go. I mean, you should let him go and divorce him." And I was just so taken aback, I couldn't believe it. I'd put up with the bad theology. I'd put up with a lot of this. The only reason I made it was the last 5 or 6 years I was there. I was going to Toronto Airport Christian Fellowship conferences, which were kind of uplifting and positive compared to what we were going through. But now, if you look back and see, that looks pretty crazy too. But it was a lesser of a crazies. It was lesser of a crazies. And the church that I went to was non-denominational. But I have to say this about that: it was non-denominational. They were linked to the church that Denny McBride went to as a kid. And I know this because of the puppet ministry thing that we did, that we picked up from them. So there was no one ministry theology they were following. They were kind of making it up as they went along. Some people there were hardcore Vision Forum followers. There were people that were big supporters of Mike and Debbie Pearl and their To Train Up a Child, Beat Your Kid Silly book. There were people that followed Vadi Baltram and those guys. There were others that followed other ministries. So there was none of these ministries, ATI, Bill Gothard, all that. None of that was actually part of our church, but various people followed these ministries and brought parts of it into the church. When I first joined, and Laura and I were both traumatized by what she was going through, so that every time you turned around, we were like clinging on to each other all the time, her and I. Somebody gave me a copy of the book To Train Up a Child and suggested that I beat Laura because Laura was fearful. I beat that fear out of her. I was told that. I read that book and I turned around and I threw it away. I put it in the garbage can because I didn't want anybody to have to read that. I was horrified. I should have known then. That was, for me, was the first big really red flag. And I just kind of thought, well, the pastor's not preaching that from the pulpit. So this is obviously some tangent this woman has gone off onto. Nitwit, I am sorry to hear that. There are many people in my old church that revered those books. And we actually did a Bible study on Created to Be a Helpmeet. And I had to keep biting my tongue because it was the most horrible theology I'd read in a long time. So here I am trying to be submissive to my husband, trying to be honoring to my pastor in my church. I came off that platform. My husband was there. He was on his way to the Methodist church and said, look, I'm coming with you to the Methodist church. This is going to be my last Sunday here. Can you stay for the service? And then afterwards we can get the pastor to release us. So he stayed. He stayed for me that time. We got to the end. We went to the pastor. We approached the pastor and said, look, this was our last Sunday at church. We're not coming back. We're not coming back. And he got very nasty with us. He got nasty with me. He said, I refuse to release you. I refuse to release you and send you off with a prayer. I refuse that. Fortunately for us, a dear, sweet friend who was also a pastor, but was not the pastor of that church, he overheard this and said, come here, let me pray for you. And that's what he did. He prayed for us and did the whole, I'm releasing you from this church thing. Releasing us from the theology that says my husband's always right. He released us from the theology that said beat your children. He released us from all the toxic thoughts that doctors were evil, the whole 9 yards. The next week, I went with my husband to the Methodist church in town. Oh, thank you. I have lots of strays. I have lots and lots of strays. That's my ministry now. I feed stray cats. So we left. The next week, I was at the Methodist church. They had just started, not a month before, a contemporary worship service. So that's the one we went to. I met various people. I met people that had been badly damaged by the local Almoller Baptist church plant. I met people from all sorts of fundamentalist churches who'd been hurt, who were there because of that. There was a small group of us, maybe 20. And I joined the brand new worship team. We joined the brand new service, and way we went. But it gets way worse than that. I thought I was done with it. but I thought I could still have friends there. My mistake. That was just the beginning of the end. What happened was where we were living was a small southern town, of course, in Virginia, and word spread. Once word spread that we had left, we were apostates now and unbelievers because we were going to church with the Methodists, with the homosexual abortionists. It's really what they thought, because the Methodist Church at that time had they had a saying that was open hearts, open hands. And I know so many people that came out of the most toxic fundamentalist churches in that area that ended up at our service, including a few pastors out of those very fundamentalist churches. So for me, it turned into a torture sometime. Nobody said a thing to my husband. But whenever I went out in public in my small southern town, I'd run into somebody. They may not have been at my home church, but they were one of the other churches that were loosely affiliated with it, and say, I heard you turn your back on Jesus. You're apostate now. And I'd have to say, no, I'm not. What happened was my husband wanted to go to the Methodist church and I followed him. Aren't I supposed to be submissive to his wishes? What I finally started doing was I did the Jesus. You've ever noticed when Jesus ran across anybody that was opposing his theology, a lot of times he would ask questions. Asking questions was a technique I learned during my Stevens ministry training. So somebody would run up and ask me a question. So I say, I heard you were this, this, and this. And, well, who told you that? And then they tell me, I said, why would they say such a thing? And I just kept on going and going and going, and it shut them up. It finally silenced my critics totally. I had 2 years of this almost daily, running into people who were saying things to me in my small town. I cried every single day for 2 long years before I managed to get a hold of myself and go, guess what? No. No means no means no means no. Because these people were just being utterly ridiculous about the whole thing. And at the same time, I was thinking myself above the Methodist theology and above the Methodists. Boy, did I have a humbling. I started to realize that a lot of the things that I'd been taught weren't even in the Bible, or they were a Bible verse that had been extrapolated out, had been added to, had been wrongly interpreted, wrong interpretation. I started to learn a lot about how the Bible was written, who read it, who wrote what translations, which translations were the most and least problematic. Started to study that stuff. I started to attend classes at the Methodist Church, like my friend Dwight taught a wonderful class called When Bad Christians Happen to Good People. I started taking a lot of like Stevens ministry training. I started going to a lot of the healing things they did. And it ended up being a positive experience for, I'd say, about 10 years before we came here to Costa Rica. It was a positive experience for the most part. It only got ugly towards the end, and it got ugly only because they started to, some people wanted to steer the church into the same direction that my old church had been going into, very fundamentalist. They exploded that particular service, the Methodist Church. One of the things that happened during my time at the Methodist Church was my old church blew apart. I mean, it blew apart, and most of the people left. We had a fair amount that ended up at the Methodist Church. So I got to minister to some of them, and it was hard because I really wanted to punish people. I really had that in me, and I know it's wrong and evil and all that stuff, but when you've been so horribly wronged, when I left, I only retained really one friend. One. And probably I would have said before, I had probably 50 or 100 friends. She's still my good friend. We don't agree about religion, but her and I don't care about that. We're still real good buddies. I love her to death. She's come here and visited me before. I want her to come visit me again. But she was the only one. And it's going to be interesting for me in the fall when this couple comes over that I knew from that old church. who I'd taken their kid to Toronto many times. They took my kids. We traded off. We hung out all the time. The minute I left the old church, she told me she couldn't even talk to me on the phone anymore because I was clearly dicing with that devil. Well, all I can say is I would rather be dicing with the devil and be with the people that need help, that need healing, that need understanding any day of the week than with the prideful that think they know it all, people that think they have their theology all together. She is a true friend, Nitwit, and she's one of my bestest true friends of all time, even when we fight about religion. She likes Jim Baker, and I'm always poking her about Jim Baker and his flood buckets. That's the ministry she supports. Her husband loves Pat Robertson and the 700 Club. It was just a mixed bag there. We had people there that liked all those ministries. And it was such a strange place because so many people didn't even believe in having like health insurance. They only believed in these insurance, not even insurance, these health groups that were real popular in Funky Town where you pay like $50 a month in. And then if you have a medical need, you can get money out. So many things were just so completely wrong that I'm still unpacking it. Like I said, that memory of the pastor weighing us and hassling us about a house, that just surfaced a day or two ago. That was something I hadn't thought about in years. And now I'm looking back at it and I'm going, that's possibly the most toxic thing I've ever experienced. I mean, way worse than some of the theology. And I missed it. I missed having those friends. I missed not having someone show up with casseroles every time I was sick in the hospital. I missed that. I missed the friendship. I missed going places with these ladies. I even missed the crazy conferences we went to. I missed it all. And during all of this, I have to say this, Tom Smith, who I'm going to put links to it down below. I have my entire history with Tom, and Tom impacted my faith journey quite a bit. When I left, Tom started sending us ugly, ugly, ugly emails. Let me back up. The ugly email started when my husband had cancer because I told Tom to buzz off when he was buzzing around us because Jim had some procedures. They told me to keep him away from anybody for three weeks. 3 weeks until he healed, until his immune system came back. And that's what I was trying to do. And this guy was just trying to insert himself. We had all kinds of problems with him. He had an affair with a friend of mine. He and the lady he was having an affair with told their spouses they were with me when they went away for a weekend to view a Van Gogh exhibit. I did not know they'd said this. So when their spouses said, "Hey, that was really nice of you to treat so-and-so that Van Gogh exhibit," was like, what? That was the kind of thing that was really common. So I've got a whole big thing on my Tom Smith experience, but Tom started emailing us all the time saying, "I pray God heaps coals on your head and burns the sense into you," and just ugly, threatening, horrible emails all the time. It got so bad that I actually contacted the church and said, "This guy is this close to a restraining order. What can you do?" And the pastor said, "Well, I'll take care of it." And that's one of the few things he did do. So I'm going to put in the description here links to my Tom Smith story, because that really talks about the high level of crazy that I went through. I mean, I have a lot more down there talking about Tom and a lot of the things that he did. He got us in that church. We joined because of him. We end up leaving because of him. He is kind of isolated right now. He's not really a member of any of the churches that any of my former friends are, because when the split happened with the original church, he was playing both sides against the middle, going to each side, finding out what was going on, and then go tattling to the others. Tom is a real piece of work. He's trying right now to be a minister. He's trying to get all the bona fides done so that he could be a minister. Being one of the most gossipy and toxic people I've ever met, I don't think he should ever be a minister. Um, Third Street, that is the interesting thing to me about having written for No Longer Quivering for almost 10 years. I was only a few years out when I started, maybe 4 years out when I started helping Vicky out a little bit with NLQ. It's been triggering and helpful at the same time. The most surprising thing is the number of people that have contacted me to tell me their stories. Their stories are horrible. Some of them line up with my story, some of them go way beyond. One of my friends here, I didn't know what happened. All I know is she suddenly disappeared, going to the church here, disappeared, finally told me a couple of weeks ago what happened to her. And basically, the entire church showed up at her doorstep and told her to be submissive to her husband. Her husband was an abusive narcissist and she was trying to get away from him. They wanted her to stay with an abuser. And that's really common too. I saw that happen in my old church. Women that stay with abusers. So Third Street, yeah, I know you probably would. If you've been through that, you would probably get that triggering. And it's so weird how random it is. The Josh Duggar situation has triggered me mightily. The constant lying of somebody has triggered me mightily. I'm kind of sitting back right now because there's some things that have been said in the last couple of days that I'm kind of like looking at them thinking, ooh, if that's true, that's going to be a big comeuppance. I've often wished I could reach out to Jill Dillard. I don't know her entire journey. I don't know what her entire journey was been like. I don't know what, because I wasn't raised in this. I was raised Catholic. But I have nothing but sympathy and love for her because of what she's been through and that she's trying to get therapy and get past it now. There are tons of good therapists out there that can deal with this, or even good Christian ones. They're not crappy ones. Like my husband went to a really horrible, crappy one time. Told me that I was the reason my husband had problems because I wasn't submissive enough. If anybody ever tells you that your husband has problems because you're not submissive enough, flip them the bird and run, because that is so absolutely not true. So absolutely not true. They wanted her to stay with the abusive man, most definitely. Yes, Rena Rue. They're all mixed up. So my girlfriend is now living. She flew back to North Carolina. I keep telling her she has to come fly back here and visit me and stay in my guest house because I adore her. But she was being abused by the church here that we're now going to, and I had no idea. But the people who abused her are all gone now. They're all gone from the church. The pastor's changed. It's a different place. Now, I don't know if it's less toxic yet. I won't know that unless I go for a while. But yes, it was a big problem at old church too. I know a few women that had to turn their husbands in for that. At least I'll say this about my old pastor. He had a lot more common sense than most of the congregants. He urged people to go to the doctors. He insisted that various women leave their husbands and divorce him because the husbands were molesting the kids. And he sat there and held their hands as they went through the testimony. He did a lot of really hard, horrible things. He did me a couple of really good solids too. So I can't totally hate on him. It's the congregation. The congregation was just really crummy people screaming how Christian they were while they were running around hurting everybody else. It's just unbelievable. Yes, the Josh thing triggered me too. Third Street, it triggered me bad. And somebody's gleeful reporting on it triggered me bad. When the first reveal came out, I was very triggered, even though I actually knew about it before it came out. Third Street, I'm kind of hoping I'll get a JAW here trying to proselytize to me because I'm going to do the Jesus thing. I'm just going to question everything. I'm never going to express an opinion. I'm just going to question. If you ever run across somebody that's giving you crap about something stupid, use that method. It works wonders. And eventually they realize how stupid they sound and they just trail off from what they're saying. It works. Um, Watchtower, yes. I haven't seen any of them here. I've seen Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons. The Mormons have been here 2 or 3 times. I was nice to them, but I've had to say a number of times, um, not interested. And Aaron, you're talking about how they're big at your train station. A few times the big train. I know they are. I've seen them there. I've seen them at that train station. I've seen them at all of the train stations on that line. I've seen them in front of my post office when I lived in Virginia. They set up all over the place. Um, and the thing is, all you have to do is look at the Duggars. The Duggars are like, and here's the funny thing about my old church. A lot of people would say it wasn't righteous enough and would spin off and they would do home church or they'd try to join the Mennonites because we were living in an area that had a huge Mennonite population. I had a Mennonite prayer partner for a while who was a wonderful lady. I can't say enough nice things about her. But so many people would spin off and say, this is not righteous enough for me. You guys are still too full of sin. So they would run off and form their own home church with themselves and maybe one or two other families. And I got so disgusted with that, I started to call that the Church of the Holy Basement. Every time I saw something, oh, they're going to the Church of the Holy Basement. I always found it kind of funny, though, that every time somebody would run away from my old church and try to join the Mennonites would deny them membership. The Mennonites don't mind if anybody comes to their services, and they're really sweet people. But joining is a whole different ballgame. If you have a problematic history that has followed you from church to church to church, and you've blown up a bunch of churches, the Mennonites aren't going to let you join. Oh, South Street, yeah, train station in Boston. You were right, Aaron. They're there. They're at Union Station in D.C. They're at every single stop from Union Station through Fredericksburg, through Manassas Park, Manassas Airport, up to Baltimore. They're at every stop. I've seen them with their little displays. I usually will talk to missionaries when they come around. But now I do the question thing. I'm not automatically sweet with them. I'll be nice, but and I have to laugh because when I got off the plane to move here over, it was like 4 years ago. 4 years ago now. Well, in a month it'll be 4 years. Here was the interesting thing for me. The day after I got here, and my husband was teaching English in a little teeny tiny Costa Rican village called Cope de Dota in the mountains in the Central Valley, south of San Jose, a long way from here, like 6 hours. We were in a tiny village. The next village over was somewhat larger and they had a beautiful park in the middle. They also had different stores and things. So the first day I was there, my husband said, let me show you how to ride the bus here, what you need to do, what you need to say. And you can always get over to Santa Maria to get your stuff if you really want it and stuff. So we took the bus in and we got off, and in the middle of the park, we saw Mormon missionaries immediately, both from the Utah area. Stuck there in Cope. They weren't in Cope. They were in Santa Maria. They were stuck in Dodota, which is an area in Tarazu. And I talked to them for a little while. Thankfully, when they tried to give us the come to Mormon Jesus, we were kind of like, nope. And it's been funny since I've been here because I've gone to the Catholic Church a number of times. In Cope, that was the only option, was the Catholic Church. And I liked that they had one priest there that would speak every now and then, was from Ethiopia, who spoke English and spoke Spanish, about as well as I did, I should say. His sermons, his homilies, he wrote them down and he was reading them in phonetic Spanish. So him I could get because he went nice and slow. The regular priests I didn't always get. But I got to say, I saw one of the coolest things I've ever seen that had to do with faith in Cope de Dota, in the middle of this tiny village. We'd been there 2 months, one night, one Saturday night, as a matter of fact. We went to bed early. There wasn't a lot to do in Copiague, and they rolled up the sidewalks as soon as darkness hit, which was like 6:30. So that night we'd gone to bed about 8 because there wasn't anything to do. It was raining, it was cold, it was miserable. So we got into the blankets and went to bed early. So there was that. About midnight, we woke up because there was this horrible yelling and banging and clanging, and our landlord was screaming, and we could hear people down the street screaming. And I said, "Oh, they're drunk over at the I can't even remember the name of the bar now. There was a bar there that we weren't even supposed to go to because he was part of a peace corps sort of thing, and that bar was off limits, and they would have fights there all the time. So I went to stick my head out the door to see what was going on. I put my hand on the doorknob. The doorknob was hot. When I opened the doorknob, a wave of heat just almost knocked me over. The Catholic church across the street from the guest house we were staying in, that we were rooming in, was on fire. I mean, seriously on fire. And this place is way up a mountain that we were in, way up at the top of the mountains. It took the fire department almost an hour to get there. By the time they got there, there wasn't anything but smoldering wreckage. Um, the church was wooden. It was gorgeous. It was like 200 years old. It burned to the ground on a Saturday night. And I went ahead and got hundreds of pictures of this. I've got them stored somewhere on my computer. I'll have to take a look. And the next morning I said, Jim, what are they going to do? What are they going to do for service? Because there's really no place big enough to hold a service here. The Catholic Church in that town was the center, not just the center of the town, it was the center of life in that town. A lot of things revolved around the Catholic Church. A lot of activities took place on the grounds of the Catholic Church. They had ball fields abutting it, the whole 9 yards, all sorts of things. And I said, what are they going to do? Well, you know what they did? They had church service outside that morning, like nothing had happened. And on that Friday afterwards, they had a special prayer service out in the streets. And I attended. It was the most moving thing I've ever seen. The church may have been burned down, but just like the Who's in Whoville, that was not going to defeat them. They were still linking hands and believing, still carrying their faith. So never let the men around your house, oh, the Jehovah's Witnesses. I find it interesting that Michael Jackson was raised Jehovah's Witness, and all this has come out about him molesting boys. I have to wonder if his own childhood, what that involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses and what happened to him. Jim Bob Duggar has said the most outrageous thing ever years ago when this first came out about what are my plants, and the birds are bathing themselves in the spray. I love it. Jim Bob Duggar, back to him. He said when it first came out about Josh, he said it wasn't a big deal because this happened in families. No, it does not happen in families. It happens in dysfunctional families. It happens in families that are involved with CULT from the bite model. Those are the families it happens in. It doesn't happen in others. Yeah, she did. Michael Jackson's mother kept taking them all to the Kingdom Hall there for a long, long time. So after years of being told to stay sweet and be submissive and do this and do that, coming out has been a reawakening of my feminism that I had before, that I had on a down low when I was there. And I'm kind of like full out now. I am for women, even the awful ones, even the ones that ring my chimes. And I recently got to see that when Bad Baby came out and talked about being mistreated in a troubled teen residential treatment facility. I had to stand behind her and support her, even though if you'd have told me at any point in my life I would do that, I would have said no. I would have said the same thing about Paris Hilton. But I stand with just about every woman who's been through that now. It's a terrible place to be. And I just pray for the healing for everybody. But the first start of healing is realizing what's going on. I think that Anna Duggar is going to go there someday. I think that she's going to realize and leave. It's not going to happen right away. She's in the I'm defending him mode right now. But I think when enough time has passed that he's been away, hopefully he'll be convicted and go to jail. I feel pretty likely he will be. Somebody will reach out to her and start showing her the way. Might be Jill Duggar Dillard for all we know. And that's the other weird thing about the Duggars. I heard about a lot of the stuff about Josh in my old Quiverfull church because when they first got picked for this show to do a special, it was spread like wildfire around Quiverfull town. And we were told to pray for them, that they had a son that had done some things without telling us exactly what it was he had done. So I'm going to end this. How much involvement do you believe that Michelle Duggar has in the situation? I think she has a lot of involvement. And I'll tell you why. One of the things that I did after Jim Bob Duggar had his lawyer send Patheos a email saying, hey, take that picture down. That's our picture from, hey, I'm not talking to you, from, that's our picture from TLC. You can't use it. Well, what I did was, it's kind of sneaky. I went to the bookstore where they were having a book signing for the girls' book. You remember the 4 girls wrote a book? In Alexandria, Virginia. I showed up in plenty of time. I took my daughter with me. We bought copies of books and had them signed. And I took an ton of pictures of the Duggars. And that's what I use from now on at Patheos. I used the photos of the Duggars that I'd taken so that Jim Bob could not say that I'd done something wrong. I did observe the interactions between Jim Bob and Michelle. He may make the decisions, but he looks to her and her approval. And it's very, very subtle and tacit. But she, I think, like a lot of Quiverfull women, she's driving that bus. She's just making it look like he's driving the bus. That was really the thing that I picked up on. I think that she thinks she's being submissive, but she's being just about like every other Quiverfull mother I saw that was so deeply into it. Most people I know that have joined, and their testimonies will say the husband was X, Y, and Z. So I decided I would leave it to God. I'll join Quiverfull and I'll just leave everything to God. God will change him if I'm good enough, if I'm smart enough, if I'm righteous enough, if I give you the right kind of praise, if I raise my children the way you want, if I follow this formula. And it's very formulaic. A lot of them do that. And I think that's Michelle Duggar. In some ways, even though I don't think Jim Bob was that bad. Now he's pretty bad, I think. I think he's very controlling and rigid in a lot of his thinking, as far as I can tell. And Michelle, I don't even know what to say about her. Except to say that I think that she's driving that bus. She's the one controlling a lot of what goes on. He makes the decisions. He looks at her to approve them. Okay, and I have to throw a Duggar rumor out. It is rumored they're on the verge of suing somebody for defaming them. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard the drumbeat louder and louder in the last week. I don't know. Creep vibe, yes. Jim Bob Duggar does exude the creep vibe. I will say one of the most fun times of my life was walking up to him during the book signing and telling him, hey, I'm here from No Longer Quivering. Sign my book. I told him, I said, your children are absolutely beautiful, but I oppose your theology with everything within me because you're teaching a false theology. Yeah, here's looking at you, Minnesota. You're right. I don't know if they're going to sue her or not. Last night it came out that Todd may have a love child named Daniel. I don't know how true that is. It's a rumor right now that's going on. Um, but if that's true, and the Duggars turn around and sue her, I just don't even know what to think anymore. Um, because she said so many horrible things. I think the Duggars are not going to have a hard time digging up the evidence they need. And also, they haven't reached that settlement yet with Tati Westbrook. I don't know what's going on there, but I know that if there had been a settlement, they would have spoken about it. Aaron, I saw a clip from that too because I went, what? And then started doing a little reading and research. I've seen the speculations, but I don't know how true they are. It's an interesting idea if that's the case and he's not paying child support seeing that child, which we don't know. Could be either way. Hey, Angela. It could be either way. It could be that he does exist. It could be that he doesn't and somebody's just making up. I couldn't find any evidence of him existing. They would go after her. I don't like the Duggars either. But as much as I dislike the Duggars, I even more dislike how she has used what happened to the girls to make money. She has exploited their victimhood. And even worse than that, those shirts that say joyfully unavailable, she's exploiting actual victims of R by doing that. She's exploiting that. That's one of the things they tell you in Quiverfull a lot. Never turn your husband down if he wants a little sexy fun times in the bedroom. Never, never, never. Some people equate that with the R word. I don't. Because you always have consent, whether you're saying if you're letting it happen, you're saying, yes, this is my theology. I believe that I'm supposed to have sex with him each and every time. Then you are giving consent. It may be bounded consent. It may not be legitimate consent, but it's not quite R either. Alyssa, I feel really bad about that too because she got that from me, unfortunately. I told her back when we used to talk before I realized she was taking my content and mangling it and exploiting it to use it to make money. I told her that at least two, maybe three of the boys and one of the girls have been to Bill Gothard's ATI, and it's not it's not IBLP. We all used to call it ATI. I don't know anybody calls it what she's calling it. It is the Institute of Basic Life Principles, but they've transitioned a long time ago to Advanced Training Institute, ATI. And I told her, I knew for a fact that these number of children had gone to one of Bill Gothard's Pray the Gay Away seminars where they have like a month or something. She doesn't even know what the name of these camps are. That's what's really funny. I didn't even tell her the names, but she picked that up from me, unfortunately. And I shared that with her in confidence. That's not anything I've ever put on NLQ. It's nothing that I would put on anywhere. I would not even tell you who the kids are, even though I know, because I don't think that is something you should be doing in public. It's like, oh, yeah. Llama Girl has all the clips. She has the clips of KJ wearing a diaper, which kind of blows my mind. I'm just going to tell you real quickly. I also heard that the law enforcement and the federal agency, they're looking at her for a number of things. One of the things that they're looking at her for is the fact that she has now endangered the lives of the people who have Josh living there because she gave their names. She gave their address. She posted pictures of the maps leading to their house and of their house. She's there. She exposed all that. And she got it off a British tabloid. That's what's really funny. This is what you have to remember about her. None of her information is original. It all comes from somewhere. I don't think she has any more unnamed Duggar insiders. I don't. And I haven't heard from mine in a long time, but I'm not writing anymore about them either. There are no Duggar insiders right now that she's getting this info from. She gets a lot of stuff from the Sun and the Daily Mirror. 2 British tabloids. She also trolls to see what she can find on Reddit, Bundy Snark Uncensored. She gets a lot of it from gossip columns and sites. That's where she's getting all this crap from. And it's not original. She's not a reporter. She's not a journalist. I don't know. I don't know, Aaron. I didn't know she had a meeting today. I hope it's to settle the Tati Westbrook lawsuit. And I hope Tati takes her play button. I would. I would ask for that. If I had that much evidence and I could bury her like that, I would definitely ask for that play button. So anyway, I've been on here an hour and 5 minutes. That means it's time for me to get up, take the sheets off the bed, evict pork, evict pork off the bed so I can get the sheets and wash them. And I got Mount laundry to fold today. I have so much laundry, it's not even funny. And I'll be back in about an hour to talk a little bit about Costa Rica, just a very little bit, because I've talked a lot today already on this. But this is going to be my video for my story because it's such a weird one. I was love bombed. We joined, started drinking the Kool-Aid, and then eventually left. And they threw rocks at me for leaving. That's my story. That's the little tiny version of it. Third Street, I think that might happen. I think Tati might make her publicly apologize. When the thing went down between her and Steve McRae, both of them were forced to share the same statement. So something like that might be, and that's why I think it hadn't ended, because something like that will go down. Have a good day. Love you guys. I'm shaking off the triggers. I want you to do the same thing. Let's get through this together. We've got to hold hands and scream and run forward. That's how we'll do it. Love you guys.